So over the last couple days, I've really struggled thinking about whether or not I really wanted to make this video. But enough people have asked for it that I thought it would be worthwhile content, and honestly, it'll be a great way for you guys to get to know me more as a collector and a person. So the story I'm telling you today is how I got my stadium events. But to tell that story, I first kind of have to go over how I originally started collecting at the level that I now collect at. So the story really starts out not with video games, but with Ninja Turtles. I collected Ninja Turtles really hardcore for about 25 years. Original art, and toys, and movie props, and anything you could think of that had the Ninja Turtles brand on it, which was a lot, I collected. Over the span of those 25 years, I amassed this collection that was worth, I don't know, upwards of $80,000, $100,000, something crazy like that. Because again, remember, I was collecting this stuff in the dark times for the Ninja Turtles when no one really cared. So I was picking up comic books that had a print run of like 10 for pretty cheap. At a certain point, I got so well known for collecting turtles, and I'd been doing it for so long, I started to ask questions like, does this collection define me? So that's when I decided to conduct an experiment. I would sell one thing that was fairly high dollar value and see how I felt. That one thing ended up being the first sketch of the Shredder, like the first sketch that Kevin and Peter ever drew of the Shredder ever. So I sold it, and I waited, and it felt okay, and it kept feeling okay. And so at a certain point I decided, you know what? I'm kind of over this. Not from a fan perspective, but from a collecting perspective. I still love the Ninja Turtles. I have the Ninja Turtles tattooed on my arms. At one point I found myself at Nickelodeon working on the Turtles. So I definitely never got out of the fandom. I just sort of got out of that collection. So around that same time, something kind of catastrophic and life-changing happened. My wife was diagnosed with breast cancer. As you can imagine, cancer fundamentally changes your life in all of the ways that you would expect and all of the ways that you would never expect. So there was sort of a perfect storm here for me to start collecting games. I was getting out of the Turtle collection, so I had a large amount of liquid income just from selling things. I had wanted to find something else to take up my time, specifically because now I had this horrific thing to deal with on a daily basis. And one thing I can tell you about being a caretaker for someone who has cancer is that you will never have a normal day again compared to anyone who doesn't have cancer in their lives. So I was really grasping to try to find something to be my new normal, to have something that would ground me. So on those terrible days, I had something to retreat to. It was then that I decided to start collecting video games, kinda hardcore. I burst into this hobby, and I had this piggy bank that I had suddenly accrued from this collection that I was, hemorrhaging items from, which was the Turtles collection. And at the same time, so I live in Southern California, you can't throw a rock without hitting a retro store, so I was in a different store every single day for 2.5 months. I decided I wanted to be a set collector. I decided that Super Nintendo was going to be my first set, and so within 2.5 months, I had accrued the North American set for Super Nintendo, and people were like, what the hell is going on? Who is this kid? He's just throwing money around like crazy. He must be super rich, which 100% is not the case. It was just at a time where I was sitting on this huge pile of money that I had just come upon from liquidating a 30-year-old collection of toys, comics, and art. So at this point, you're probably wondering what any of this has to do with stadium events. Which is a fair question. So after I'd finished my Super Nintendo set, I started building my NES set, and I've built a number of sets since then, but those were my first two. So of course, when building an NES set, I, like many collectors, wound up in a situation where I had the entire North American set except for stadium events. I decided that that was way too much money for a single game, and I'd never pay that, and so I decided, as a placeholder, so there's not an empty space on my shelf, to buy the PAL copy. And I was totally happy with this. This is a beautiful copy of this game, and after a couple months of it sitting on the shelf, it just didn't feel like something that I needed to replace. I didn't look at this every day and go, oh my god, I really need the North American version. So going back to my wife's cancer. At this point, she was cancer-free. She had gotten her double mastectomy and her radiation and done all her chemo, and they wrote her a clean bill of health and said, go live your life. Great. Except not great. A little over 2 years ago, my wife and I were at a Doctor Who convention when she had a seizure. Of course, we rushed her to the ER, and they did a CAT scan of her brain. And that's when we learned that not only was the cancer back, but that it's metastasized to her brain, and she had 9 tumors in her skull. As you might imagine, this sort of tore us apart again. In fact, this is something that we still deal with every day. My wife's diagnosis is terminal. We don't have a timeline, but we know that we're on one. In fact, as I'm recording this right now, she's in the hospital recovering from a loss of consciousness. So again, you're saying, what does this have to do with stadium events? Fair, I'm getting to it. About a year prior to my wife getting cancer originally, we signed up for a retirement plan. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with retirement plans, many, if not all of them, are actually life insurance policies. At the time, we didn't even know it, but my wife's policy had something called an accelerated death benefit rider, which basically means if you are considered terminally ill, the policy has the option to activate as if you had died. So very suddenly and very unexpectedly, we went from a small family living in a small apartment in Los Angeles to sitting on about $400,000. Now, most of that money went to very responsible sources. We bought this house. Piper's college is taken care of. But after all the grown-up stuff was taken care of, Heather still had this nest egg of a sizable amount of money. So completely unexpectedly, she comes to me and she says, I love you, you take care of me, you stuck with me through all of this. I really want to do something for you. What do you want? So to kind of counterbalance the horrific nature of this entire situation, I decided I really wanted something fun and something that I would enjoy and something that I would remember Heather for. So I got back to thinking about that placeholder copy of the PAL Stadium event sitting on my shelf. And I said, I wonder if there's a copy of Stadium Events on eBay. Sure enough, there was. And this thing was actually sitting up there for, I don't know, like a year. At the time, it was really, really overpriced with a best offer. So here's a hot tip. If you have something set up for best offer on eBay, don't make the buy it now so astronomically huge that people are just going to pass it over and think that you are a jerk, and they're just not going to put in an offer. The seller said when I approached him that in the year that it had been on eBay, I was the first one to send him an offer because this thing was marked up probably at the time. Now it would be almost reasonable, but at the time it was probably like $5,000 over market. Anyway, so we went back and forth, and I ended up picking up this cart for what now would be a steal, but was a competitive price when I bought it. So yeah, in essence, Stadium Events was a gift from my wife. I do like to bring that up when people ask whether or not she supports this hobby, and then I get to say, yeah, well, she bought me one of the most expensive games in this room. I'm not adverse to spending large amounts of money on games. I recently bought the NWC cart, so it's not that. But I don't think I would have, in any normal situation, paid the going rate for Stadium Events in any normal situation. Mostly because what it is. I don't know. I just don't find it historically relevant enough to pay large amounts of money for. And that's generally my gauge for when I'm willing to spend a lot of money on something, is its historical relevance. I absolutely do think it's part of the North American set. It is not a variant. If anything is the variant, it's world-class track meet. But yeah, I would have otherwise been happy just having that PAL placeholder on my shelf forever, but this copy is so special to me in ways that have nothing to do with its monetary value. People ask me what my most treasured thing is in this game room, and I always say this game, and people are just like, oh, well, that's because it's really expensive. Yes, it's really expensive, but that's not why I love it. I love it because my wife bought this game for me as a sign to show me how much she appreciates what I do for her in this family. And that's really special. Anyway, gang, I know this isn't the most feel-good story ever. I mean, it is certainly a silver lining to a horrible, horrible situation that we have to deal with in my family. But I think you guys were expecting like a cool swap meet story or something, and that's definitely not what I've delivered to you today. But again, I did want to tell this story to give you a little bit of background on why I started collecting at this kind of insane level, and specifically because a number of you have asked me about stadium events in particular and wanted to know the story of how I acquired it. But yeah, if you like this content or any of my other content, please like and subscribe. I'm really trying to put my best foot forward on this YouTube thing. Here's hoping you think I'm doing a good job. I promise the next video won't be so depressing. Thanks for watching, everybody. See you later.